Okay, we are now going to learn how to throw on the potter's wheel. So this is going to be a relatively long video because there's a great deal I want to show you and need to share with you. This is that you don't sit down at the wheel and struggle and flounder. You need to have all the right tools, you need to have wedged your clay properly, and then you need to go through the steps in a very methodical way. I'll be in the room to reinforce everything you're learning in this video. All right, this is an exciting process, but it's harder than it looks. I'm going to begin by telling you the tools you need and where you can find them, and a little bit about wedging clay. So first of all, right behind me here are our collection of buckets. So this is where you'll get a bucket, and you're going to fill that bucket all the way up. Students make the mistake of putting like this much in, and then it's really hard to get your water. You have to reach way in, all the way to the top. All right, let me turn this way. We are at the wedging table here. It is absolutely crucial that you wedge your clay, even if it's right from the factory in that cube, right? I've told you that they have it, they send it from the factory without any air bubbles and all that, and sometimes when you're hand building or rolling a slab, you just slice off a piece and roll. But this is throwing, and you really need to get this clay well wedged and compressed so that you don't have any issues when you're throwing with it or when it's fired. So we're using the brown iron stoneware, all right, brown iron stoneware. You're going to take a wire tool. Actually, got to back the truck up. You got to make sure that this is clean. If this has any schmutz on it and you wedge, all these little particles are going to come off in your clay. So right in front of you between the sinks are one of these, and you want to clean off your area. And I would ask that rather than just like stick it off to someone else deal with it, that you actually scoop the stuff up and throw it in the garbage can, which is right next door to the wedging table. All right, putting that back. So now I have my wire tool. We're using the brown iron stoneware. We've used it once before for coil pots. This is strong stuff, and this is what you want when you're making things on the potter's wheel, because mostly what people make are functional dinnerware, mugs, casserole dishes, plates, bowls, and so we want this to be strong clay. Those pieces will not be very durable, and they'll start breaking and chipping if you use low fire clay. So the high fire brown, and I'm going to start to wedge, and I count to 50. If you're not that great at wedging, once you become a potter, you're going to get better at it, because you got to do it before you throw. All right, so rather than have you watch me wedge this for 50 times, like a cooking show, I have clay that's ready to go. So let's say this is wedged well enough. This is a really big piece of clay for a new potter, guys. So you're going to, I'm going to pick this up a little bit. I feel like you're not getting a good view. You're going to take this, and you're going to use your wire, and you're going to make balls of clay that are like large oranges. Okay, that's a nice big orange. All right. Anything smaller, it'll be hard to make anything out of it when you're a new potter, and anything bigger, same thing applies. So they don't have to be exactly the same. All right, so I have 3 balls ready to go. So I'm going to show you, here they are. I grabbed a little piece of plastic to put them on so that when I'm throwing with one, the others are kind of covered. And yeah, now I've got 6. I'm going to stick these back in the bag. Do not leave the clay bag standing open, because it will dry out. The tools you need. Well, as we talked about already, you need a full bucket of water. There we are. You're going to need your needle tool. You're going to need the stick tool that you have in your kit, stick tool. You will need your rib, and you need a sponge, and you need your wire tool. Okay, your wire tool. And your clay that's nicely wedged. Off we go to the wheel. Okay, so can't really see my face because I'm showing my body, because I have on this special smock. It's called a potter smock, right? So here's my regular smock, but I need my legs to be covered and my knees when I'm throwing because it's messy. So these have longer smocks and they split, so when you sit down at the potter's wheel, each of your knees gets covered. I also, because I have my fancy little shoes on today, I put these shoe covers that I bought over my shoes. Again, if I splash or drip, from my hands onto my shoes, I won't be sad. All right, we're ready to start. All right, I'm ready to go. So here we have, this is called a Brent wheel, that's the name of it. It has an accelerator pedal. There's a switch on the right-hand side. You click it on, and then you press the pedal. And you can just it's a variable speed wheel. So you can go fast or slower, really slow, all right? You'll see on these that there are these two bat pins. They're little pegs that are sticking up. And that's because we want to be able to put something on here, what's called a bat, a throwing bat, that we'll be able to remove when we finish our pot. So we have different bats. They live over near the kiln room. You've probably seen them, and some of you have used them to hand build on. So you'll see that this has holes, right? And the holes go on the pins, and they are made for these wheels, and so they fit perfectly. We also have ones that don't have holes all the way through, but they have them on the back. So there's the peg. Now, what's confusing about this is there are 4 pegs, and the wheel only has 2. So how do you figure that out? Well, that's because there are 2 different kinds of wheels, and the pins are different distances apart, and so this is a universal bat that can be used on 2 different kinds of potter's wheels. We want to use the pins that are closer to the edge, all the way out. See how these are in a bit? So we're going to use the ones that are way outside. And this is tricky because you can't see, so you have to just kind of feel your way to get those bat pins to line up. There we go. And that won't move, all right? So I see that this is a little dirty, so I'm going to start right off the bat, dipping in water, and I'm going to clean off my bat. And folks, let the wheel do the work. I see people going like this with it spinning, but you can just hold it. It's fun, right? Go from the middle and drag it out, and it cleans it right off. Now it's a little slippery. I don't want my pot to slide off, so I have towels. They're meant to get smutchy, and so I have a box of them. So I grab a towel. Alrighty, I've got all my tools. I like to keep them on my wheel. My water's handy. I've got my sponge. I'm ready to throw. So we're going to take one of those balls of clay, right? And I'm going to make sure it's nice and compressed. And then I need to stick it to the wheel. So I've just dried it, but I'm going to put one little dot of water and then smack it down. All right? And you want to get it as close to the center as you can, because what you then need to do is center it. So I don't know if you can tell, but this pot is like doing this, right? It's not centered. And so that's the first task of a potter, is to get the pot centered on the wheel. If it's not centered, you're going to make a funky, crazy-looking off-center pot, a wonky pot. So douse your hands completely in water, completely. Bring a lot of water over here. If you just put in your fingers and bring them over here, you're going to be too dry. We need water, okay? Now, how do you get this to center? This is one of the trickiest parts. So you're not going to be able to center if you're like this, if your elbows are out. And you also can't center if you're sitting back here and your elbows are, and you're reaching out across. What you need is for your stool to be right up against the wheel. Remember, you've got your potter smock, so your pants are good. Make sure that they're sitting over your pants. There we go. And you want to be right over the pot, okay? And I anchor my elbows, and I put them in against my body, all right? Now I'm a little more stable, and I'm going to put the hands on either side and push down with one hand and pull in with the other. So it's almost like you're pushing away here while you're pulling in here. This clay's a little stiff, so I'm going to squeeze it up into a cone and add water. I'm trying to soften it a little, and then I'm going to push back down again. So the secret to centering is to stay completely anchored. Your elbows should be resting on your knees, in against your body, and you're leaning, your face is right over so you can use your body weight to press. You'll know it's centered when your hands are perfectly still. This is not centered. You see how my hands are moving now? I just threw it off center. I'm going to squeeze, counterbalance, pushing this way, pulling this way. And I'm using almost all of my hands. See where they're dirty? Okay? You must have your hands also all the way down here. I see a lot of students that do this. See, my fingers are straight, and they end up with like wide mountains that go way out like this. It should look like a little dome, and therefore pulling in at the bottom. Let me show you something else about centering. And we'll do this when you're at the wheel. I'm going to pull this piece of clay up into a cone. Throw that off center. You'll be able to center this immediately, even if you've never been on the wheel in your life. It's not that hard. You grab it and stay still. What makes it so difficult to center is that it's stuck to the potter's wheel. It's stuck to this plastic a little off center. Nobody ever slaps it down right where it needs to be. So you have to move the clay, on the plastic with it stuck to it. That takes some elbow grease. And I'm telling you this because this brings home my point. You can't center with your fingers out. You must be grabbing the clay, particularly where it meets the wheel, right? The pinky fingers have to be grabbing. All right. I'm centered. So now I have to drill a hole. And I want the hole to be right in the middle. And the best way to do that is to anchor your hands, again, just like when you were centering, and you hover one thumb over the middle. Now, where's the middle? Well, if you want to do a little preliminary marking of the clay, you can take your index finger, put it in the middle, and slowly pull it out to the side. And you get this beautiful spiral. And the center of the spiral is the bullseye. That's where the center of the clay is. So, I'm going to do not try to drill like this with your arms off of the wheel, off of your body. You need to be a nice, concise triangle, right? My two elbows make a triangle with my hands. My body is the last side of the triangle. All right. Elbows are anchored. I also cup the clay because that's going to help me. If you try to center without touching the clay like this, you're going to float around and you're going to put it in the wrong place. So anchor the elbows, cup my hands around the nicely centered clay, and then I have my bullseye and I start drilling down. It's really best to drill down with the fingerprint part of your thumb, not the nail. If you drill with your thumb bent like this, you'll get this little tiny hole that you can barely get your thumb into. But if you press more with this part of your thumb, then you get a little more open hole, and it makes it easier to see what you're doing. So I'm drilling down. I'm going to stop because I don't want to drill all the way through, right? Then I'll have a pot that has no bottom. Pick up your needle tool. You're going to measure your bottom right now. This is how you do it. You hold it as if you're going to cut a steak. You want to hold it this way. You're not going to be able to measure. If you hold it like this finger is going to help you measure. Like I was going to cut a steak. Do you see that? Okay. Then I stick the tool into the clay until it hits the bottom. And then I run the index finger down until it hits the bottom of the pot. And then I keep it there and I lift. And I see that I have a really thick bottom. That is a lot of clay. This bottom's way too thick. Okay, put the needle tool down. Now I know I need to drill more. But now I'm running into trouble because my thumb can't go any farther without me doing this. So I'm going to switch to fingers. So I'm going to use the other hand. I'm still cupped. I'm still in a locked triangle. These fingers are longer, so I can drill down a little bit more with these fingers. And then, notice I've kept the hole kind of open. How do you do that? You pull to one side and the hole will open up. Okay, that's what we want, so I can get my needle tool in there. And I got a big puddle of water. Let's get rid of that so I can see what I'm doing. And how did I do that? You take a sponge, you squeeze it out. Now it's thirsty. If there's a puddle of water, you stick it in, it sucks the water up. Now you can see. All right? Turn the wheel off. Hold it like I'm going to cut a steak. Stick it down into the clay. Run my finger until it touches the bottom. Lift up. Okay, bring it closer to the screen. That's much better. That's a pretty good bottom. What is that? That's like half an inch. Half an inch is good. All right? Great. So the next step is I need to widen the bottom of this pot. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you a little graph. Use your towel, Mrs. Brody. That's what it's there for. Okay, clean off my hands. And I'm going to move the camera. And if you look up over the kiln room door, there's a little chart. Where's my finger? Right there. And that chart shows you all the steps. All right? So, and it's hard to see here. I think there's a zoom, but I'm not going to bother. You'll look at it when you're throwing. And so I've just done the first 3 steps. Now I need to widen the bottom of the pot and get the bottom really nice. Why am I doing that now? Well, because later when I start pulling the pot up, it's going to get too tall. And I'm going to have a hard time to get to the bottom. So let's fix the bottom right now. So we're going to add more water. You need it to be slippery. Again, I'm locking in my elbows. I was just drilling with these fingers. I'm going to go back in, but this time I'm going to turn them sideways. And I'm going to push them toward this hand. So watch. This cups the clay. I'm on the right-hand side. These fingers go inside, and I'm going to go this way. Here I go. Instead of down, I'm going over. It looks like this. I'm going over. And sure enough, my bottom's getting wider. The bottom had a little bump, so I get rid of that. Let's use the dry sponge. Okay, that's looking pretty good. There should be a little tunnel. So I can hook my finger under here. There's a tunnel. All right, this is a little tunnel under here. Good. All right, I'm ready to pull. It's called pulling. So I'm going to fix my bottom some more. This is the time. Get your bottom really nice. The sponge does a really nice job. And I see students when they try to fix their bottom, they go in and they're like moving it around. Remember when I was cleaning off the wheel head? You just put it in there and hold it. And the sponge and the wheel will do the work for you. All right, time to pull. Let's add a little more water. You're going to pull, if you think of this as a clock, right? Seated here. This is 6, this is 12, this is 9, this is 3. I'm going to do all of my pulling at about 4 o'clock. All right, so I'm going to, and what we want to do is basically going to pull this up. And I need to use both hands to pull up, and they need to come up together. If I go up like this, it's going to be a mess. And it takes practice. You won't be able to do it the first time. But this is it. You want to stick this hand all the way to the bottom. Right? You don't want to grab it up here. You'll never throw it. You got to go all the way to the bottom. This hand is all the way to the bottom. They're right across from each other. Do you see this? They're right across from each other. I'm also using my thumb a little bit. I could just do the fingers, but I'm going to let my thumb help me pull. All right? Put the fingers across from each other. And you squeeze a little bit, and you pull the 2 hands up together. Is my head getting in the way? I got to be careful. I don't lean over too much. All right, there's my first pull. I now have a little bit of a pot here. All right? But look at how thick it is. Like, that's not good. Okay. So, I'm going to add a little more water. By the way, if you just keep adding water until your pot looks like this, it's full of water. See it all? Your bottom will turn to mud, and you will have cracks later on. So I'm always adding water and taking it back off. So now I'm squeezing the sponge out. Now it's thirsty. Take the water back off. Needs to be slippery. You can squeeze a tiny bit of water that runs down both walls. Good. Next pull. Go back down. Give it a squeeze. You'll get a little ridge happening, and you're going to pull that ridge up, and you're going to use your hands at the same pace. They go up together. And then when you get to the top, you stop and separate. A lot of new potters, they do their pull, and then they go to the top, and they let them cross over, and it makes a big mess. What you want to do is do your pull. When you get to the top, pause and release a little pressure. Just make sure this is staying right where you want it, and then release it. Let's do another pull. How many pulls does it take? Ideally, if you're a really good potter, it takes about 5 at the most. If you're a new potter, it might take you 10. What you don't want to do is 20 pulls, because then the pot's going to just collapse on you. And here's why. Clay has a throwing life. Because we keep adding water to it, there's a certain amount of time before the clay gets too wet and it collapses and therefore dies, right? Throwing life. So we don't want to try to pull up in 2 because you'll rip the pot if you try to use 2 pulls to get the thing up, and you don't want to do 20 because then you're just adding way too much water. So now I'm pretty much where I want to be. I'm just checking. I'm giving a little more pressure. Yeah, this pot is right where it should be. So if you'll notice, I have like a tree trunk thing happening here. It's flaring out. It doesn't look nice. So you can take your rib, and I'm going to explain what this circle is for. When you were hand building, you're like, why does it have a hole in it? Well, it has a hole in it for potters, because if your hands are slippery, it gives you it allows you to grab something, right? So I'm going to hold it by the circle, and I like the fact that this mimics the side of my pot. And so I'm going to go down, rest this on the wheel. I'm on the right side again. You're always doing everything on the right. And I'm going to push in toward the bottom, taking that clay off. I'm going to do it again. Go down there and scrape that off. Look at that. That looks nice. All right. Now we have a nice. I'm going to fix my lip. My lip got a little wobbly. All righty. So now it's time to shape and finish. You could certainly say, oh, look, I made a beautiful, nice, straight little mug. This is what I want. I'm going to stop. That's fine. Or you can play around with shape. And so I'm going to make sure it's wet. You can squeeze a little water from the top. There we go. And I'm going to put my inside hand below my outside hand and push out. So can you see my inside hand? It's beginning to bow out. Bow that out. The other hand is above it. This guy's below. And then when I get to the top, I think I'll change positions and flare it. And now I have this kind of a thing, which I'll show you a little bit. I'll show you the profile when I can take it off the wheel. So I'm going to make that belly a little bigger. That looks good. All right, and I'm just about done. The finishing touches are, we got rid of that tree trunk, but I also feel it's important to put a little bit of an undercut in there. It's called a foot. So I'm going to go in and peel some clay away. And now there's an indentation down in here. Yeah, that's better. I'll show you in profile in a minute. It's hard to see. I don't want to keep messing with the camera. I'm getting all the water out of the bottom. Don't leave water in the bottom of the pot. You will get what we call an S-crack. And then you'll have a pot that that leaks. All right, so I like the shape. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fix the rim. This is a coffee cup. This should not be square like this. That will not be pleasant to use. Instead, you want to round the lip if you're going to have a drinking vessel. It should be rounded and soft for the lips. Cool. Okay, I'm done. Oh, I think one more thing. So I have noticed that there's a natural spot here where it seems to have a zone. I'm going to use the side of my thumb, and I'm going to put a little line in here, because I think that would be pretty, especially when I'm glazing. Using the edge of my thumb, cleaning it up. And now I have a little line, which you're going to see in a minute. Okay. The last thing you do is you wipe off your hands, because you're very slippery. And then you take your wire tool, and you're going to drag it through. Now, it needs to go through really taut. It can't go through floppy like this. It'll cut right through your bottom. So you hold it like so, with these things sticking out the ends. Okay? So it's like this. And then I'm going to wrap around a couple of fingers here and wrap around a couple of fingers here. And then I can put my thumbs. Now it's very taut, and it's also small, so I have a lot of control. You're going to go to the 12 o'clock part of your pot. You pull it tight, you press it down, and you drag it through. There you go. And then the beauty of these bats, is then you just pick this up. You don't have to touch your pot and ruin it, trying to move it off the wheel. All right? And here it is. Here's that line I put in. And I bellied it out, and there's the foot. It's a little bit of an indentation. And now let's look at the anatomy of this pot so you can see what we're going for. I'm going to cut this pot in half. This usually makes my students gasp. Oh no, it's so nice. But, you know, I've done this for a long time, so I can just make another one. All right, and then let me cut a line in this with my stick tool so that you can see what we're going for. Taking off this stuff, and all of this. Okay, good. So, there it is. So So you can see it's pretty consistent in terms of its height. Sorry, in terms of its thickness. And then I've left enough on the bottom. Where's that stick tool? Mrs. Brody, what'd you do with it? What'd I do with it? I'll use my, oh, there it is. Hiding on the top of my, so you're eventually going to trim this. You're not done until you let this get leather hard, turn it upside down and trim it. So I would take some out of the middle here, right along here, so that I had a raised area in the bottom. And it would just sit on a ring, which I'll teach another day. If you didn't get that, don't worry. All right, so I am now going to go through the steps again because I inevitably forget things. And this will go much faster, and so it's also more entertaining and less boring. You get to see it again, and it'll all familiar. You'll be familiar with everything I'm doing, and it'll reinforce. I do this in a live demo. Okay, back to my balls of clay. Oh, happy, happy, joy, joy! I was smart enough to wedge 3 balls of clay. Remember, if I'd only wedged 1, I'd be stopping now, cleaning off my hands, going to the wedging table, cutting off clay, wedging it. No, 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 no. Make sure you have at least 3 balls. And I'm an experienced potter. I always come over with a dozen because I throw quickly. You will not. 3 will do it. Okay, there's a little clay here, which is making this sticky. So I don't need the drop of water because I have some leftover clay from my other pot. So that's going to grab. Good. Turning up the wheel to high. Actually, no. So glad I'm doing it again. This wheel will go this fast. That's really fast. Like, you will not be able, look at my hands. You will not be able to center that fast. I never use the wheel at full throttle. All right, 3/4 speed, a lot more control. If somebody told me I had to center like this every day, I'd be really bummed out. It's really hard to do. So I'm going to go 3/4 speed, pushing down and away while I'm pulling in. Elbows are against the body. I need more water. One of the tricks to centering is, that I showed before, is if it won't center, you can pull it up and then get this centered and then go down. It's easier to keep it centered than to get it centered. Keeping that centered all the way down. Slowing down some more. All right, am I centered? How do you know? Students ask me, Mrs. Brody, is this centered? There's no way I can tell just by looking at that pot. I mean, unless it's really far off center. The way you can tell if it's off center is if your hands are still. My hands are still. They're not doing this. And my fingers aren't doing this because it's bumpy. It's smooth and it's centered. Next step was to find the center and drill a hole. You can use this technique. By the way, when you get better, you won't need it. I don't do the spiral thing anymore, but it may help you as a new potter. I'm going to lock my elbows in. I'm going to cup my hands around the clay because they're going to keep me still. I'm going to hover one thumb, but not the fingernail. I'm going to hover the thumb like this, fingerprint part of the thumb, and push. Now it's feeling kind of dry, so I'm going to gently release and add water. You don't want to, you never want to attack the clay or release the clay quickly. You'll throw it off center. So if I just grab this and go, I'll throw it off center. And also when I'm drilling just then, I was like, oh, not enough water. I gradually release the clay. Otherwise, if you release it quickly, it's a mess. Switching to my fingers because they're longer. Looks like I threw the hole off a little off center. Let's check the bottom. Needle tool, make your presence known. This happens to me a lot. It will happen to you. Oh, there it is. Hiding in plain sight. Here I go. That's good. Great. I can do my first. Oh no, I have to widen the bottom. Okay. Hands back inside like you were drilling, but we're going to go this way. Cross to this other hand. Nice. Now I have a tunnel. Get all the water off my wheel head so I can see what I got here. And I'm going to make sure this has some water on it. Good. Here we go. First pull. Working at 4 o'clock. Fingers are right across from each other. You can have your thumb help if you want. I could just pull this up with one hand, but there's so much more control when you do it between your fingers and the thumb assists. Not making the thumb the main tool, but having your fingers do this. Now what happens when people are working is they have a tendency to the wheel tends to pull them around. All of a sudden you find yourself at noon or 1 o'clock, and it's really awkward. Look, this arm is off. It's really awkward. You want to stay over here at 4 o'clock. It takes practice. Okay, pulling up. Get to the top, pause, and release. When I say pause, I mean I was putting pressure on this clay, right? I was squeezing and pulling, and when I get here, I just lighten up. And just make sure this stays round. I hope my head hasn't been blocking your view the whole demo. I keep looking up at the computer, but when I look down at the pot, I don't see whether or not I'm blocking your view. Hopefully not, guys. All right, making this a little taller. There we go. Okay, I've got a lot of water in the bottom. Not good. I'll get an S-crack. And I'm pretty much done with the pulling, so let's go take a dry sponge and just set it inside. And my bottom has a bit of a button. Actually, my bottom looks a little thin. I might have drilled too far, which would be good to have. It'd be good to have that happen so you can see, all the pitfalls. That's the whole point of a demo. How do you do it and what are the pitfalls? Okay, now, I don't like that this flares at the bottom. So I'm going to go in with my rib. This part is seated right on here, and I'm going to tip it. If I go in straight, if you have a rim that comes out like this, and you put this down and go in, it's going to hit your rim. But if you tip the tool, you can get it underneath. You tip it back, and it also comes off on the tool really nicely. All right, I think I'm going to, we have a stick tool, but I'm just going to turn this over and use this point because I like to have a little undercut. And then I'm going to clear away all that. Right? That's the same technique as you saw me when I did it with the stick tool, right? I went in and made an undercut, made a foot. Okay, this time, I don't have a rubber rib. Oh, that's sad. Okay, this time I'm going to, I'll try to do it with this. I'm going to put some throwing information on this. In other words, I'm going to make it really clear it was thrown on a potter's wheel. I'm going to put the tip of this rib now, and I'm going to slow the wheel down quite a bit. I'm going to press and pull up kind of quickly. And it makes these rings. And I'll show it to you. You'll see the side of it when I take it off the wheel. Okay. So now I've got a nice decoration. I don't like the looks of this lip. It looks a little thick and a little unpleasant. Oh, wunderbar. I have an air bubble. I'm so happy because I get to show you what to do. There's an air bubble in this lip right now. You can feel it and see it, guys. You take a needle tool. Whoops. Take a needle tool. And you're going to poke the air bubble in a few spots. If you just poke it in one and then press with your finger, the air bubble just moves to a new spot. So you poke it a few holes, take some water, and then work the air out of there. All right, now I have this weird, look, right, messed up lip. So go back gently with your sponge, reshape your lip. Okay. Hey, what do you do when you want to make a picture? Watch this. All right, I'm done. I'm going to make a spout. You wet your fingers quite a bit. And you're going to hold this finger, these fingers like so, and push. And you take one index finger like this and make a little swooping movement. And then just gently do that. Try not to overwork this. Less is more. Yeah. That's it. If you do more than that, you're going to mess it up. Okay, I have a little picture. And we are nearing the end of this demo. Let's drag a wire. I always clean the wire off because it's got schmutz from the last time. So I pull the stuff off the wire. I make sure my hands are kind of dry using that towel. I hold the wire. It's out of the picture, but one hand, see it sticking out the end? Come on, Mrs. Brody. Everything I have to do everything opposite to show you on the camera. It's hard to figure out. Okay, pull it tight. Wrap it around a couple of fingers. Wrap it around a couple of fingers. I'll do it again. I'll do it again. Now I'm tight. Now if you do this, too small, you're going to start here, and when you come through, you're going to crash right into your pot. If you don't wrap around your fingers, look how big and wide your wire is, and look at it. It's going to mess up your pot. So it needs to be just the right size. Sometimes I wrap around 3 fingers of one hand. It depends on the size of this thing. Okay, this is going to work great. Push your thumbs on there, pull tight, press down, drag through. And here is mine. Then you take this off, and here's my lovely pitcher. See the throwing rings I put on the side? Yeah. The bottom's okay. I thought it was too thin. A little bit of a foot. When this is leather hard, I will turn this over onto its rim and tool or trim, 2 different ways of referring to it, the bottom so it's all finished and lovely. I believe I've covered everything. I will be in the studio, of course, to help guide you the first few times you throw on the wheel. This is going to be, if you've never thrown before, you're going to be surprised how hard it is to do. So here's the assignment. Everybody, you need to make 2 pots. So in other words, if you try it the first day and you find it hard, you can't bail. You got to keep going until you make 2 pots that you have thrown and trimmed, demo video for another day, and fired and glazed. And when you have those 2, you're good. And then we shift to somebody else on the wheel. Okay. So actually, I misspoke because you're gonna make it, trim it, and after you're done trimming it, someone else gets on the wheel, and then of course over at the tables you will glaze it. All right. There you go. I have this nagging feeling I forgot something, but I'll be in the room. Cleaning up. A little addendum to the video. This is important because if you don't clean up well, all of you will suffer because you'll leave messes for the next person. That's not great, and not great for me. So you have your bucket of water here. You can use your little sponge before you leave your area to clean up the table part of your wheel. All right, or you can go get a larger sink sponge, which does the job much faster. And then these splash pans you can take to the sink to clean them off because it's really hard to get in here, right? So I remove my bucket, put it on the next wheel, and then here's how you take this apart. There are these little tabs right here. All right, and you see the little lock and key, the circle here? That's how these two lock together. So if you press this tab on both sides and press it down, it tips open and you pull back. Now there's a lot of water in there, see it? So before I try to make my way to the sink, I'm just going to put that in my bucket. There we go. And then this part doesn't tip, it slides. And it's bigger than the other part. And you can dump your water. And then you go to your sink. But look, I have some schmutz here, so I'm going to clean that off while I'm here. You try to make it efficient because you're all going to be trying to get off to class. So while I'm here, either with your little sponge, which it'll do the job, I'm going to clean this up. All right, and then these 2 are going with me to the sink. I think while I'm here, I'll clean this up and clean this. This is how you want to leave it, guys, for the next person. All right, and then over to the sink with these, and then you want to, this stuff that's this chunks and slurry, they don't go down the sink. They go in the garbage can. All right, they go in the garbage can. We're not going to recycle this clay. Don't put this down the sink because it clogs my sink. All right, and then under the faucet, you can just, I'm doing this here because of the fact that the camera is anchored to my table over here. Right, under the faucet, you clean this off. And it should be looking like so. There shouldn't be chunks, it shouldn't be crusty. And then to put this back, you start with the piece you ended with. You start with the big piece, you set it on the table, you put it nice and flat on the table and pull. And then you take this piece, cleaning it off. Okay, good. And this tips, remember it tipped open? It tips under to lock in. The stuff in your bucket. So you're going to go over to the sink. You're going to slowly pour out the water. Clay sinks. So at the bottom of my bucket is all this stuff. So I'm going to go over to the sink and I'm going to gradually pour the water off the top. And when I get to the schmutz at the bottom, I'm going to put that in the garbage can. And then clean off your bucket and throw it back where you got it from. And then, of course, your tools go back on your shelf. Don't forget to put your tools away. And any clay you didn't use can put back in the bags. If you have reject pots, I'm going to have another plastic bag over there for mushy pots that did not survive and did not, right, but you still have mushy clay that you just threw. Don't just leave it on the wedging table or leave it on your wheel. It needs to go into a plastic bag. And then when there's a big collection of it, I deal with it and wedge it. Okay, thank you everybody. Cleanup was important. If I don't teach it right, it's a rough unit of study for me because it's always a mess. Thank you very much for your cooperation in the cleanup.